everyone, and welcome to another Fresh Fiction Video Book Club. I'm Samantha Tee, and I am so excited to have our guest author tonight. Man, number one New York Times, number one USA Today, number one international, just all over the place, but also one of our favorites and a friend of Fresh Fiction. I'm so glad to have known her for so long now, Abigail Owen. Abby, it's so great to see you.
Yay, thank you so much for having me on again. It's been a little while since I've been on in the book video club.
It has, but you have been busy.
Yeah.
Latest book, The Games Gods Play, it's showing up on all sorts of different best of 2024 lists. How is that?
Mhm. It has been amazing, wild ride. Especially I've between three pen names, I've done 50 books over the last 12 years, and my career has been this wonderful kind of stair step up, but slow and gradual stair step up. So this has been quite a fantastic change.
And one of the things too, you're writing this crest at just the perfect time too
Mm,
for this new, some would say, genre of the romantasy. Some ways
yeah.
I feel I've been reading this type of stuff for years. This is definitely my jam. But what are your thoughts on this new subgenre and really being right in the middle of it with this type of book?
I think the timing just worked out really well. And it's funny because, like you said, it's new, but it's not new. I've been writing paranormal romance for all of the 12 years leading up to this. I got into romantasy with Liar's Crown and my Dominion series, so that was a couple of years ago. But for me, it's all kind of falls in the same space. And so it really depends on what you're talking about. I think the biggest difference for me from paranormal romance to romantasy is romantasy tends to be more epic romantasy, like epic fantasies that aren't set on current day Earth with like vampires or shifters kind of things, which tend to be more in the paranormal space. And so it's interesting to see the little differences, but then where they blend over because Games Gods Play is set in modern day, but it's still considered romantasy. So it's very interesting to see how a lot of it's just marketing to me. It's okay. As long as there's something magical and romance, I'm in. Like, I don't care what it's called.
And I also love the mythology angle to it. Also, that was one of the areas that I started reading with when I was really young. Dad always gave me, here's
Mhm.
all these different myths. And so now that we have lots of authors who are taking those myths and putting their own spin on it, how much research are you doing taking those different worlds of mythology and then bringing them in? Because you're not only dealing with those high level gods when you're getting into some of the details
Some of the details,
and
yeah.
some of the lesser known gods too.
Yeah, like you, I think I've always been fascinated by Greek mythology in particular, but mythology across the board. I know a lot about Norse mythology and Egyptian mythology and Celtic mythology. I find it all fascinating. To see there's the characters, there's the powers that they have, there's especially in the Greek space, the tragedy of a lot of the stories, which as a romance author, I'm like, how can we make these happy now? And so that tends to be my goal. Um, I probably started out with Clash of the Titans, the original
Oh yeah,
1980s, Harry
Harry Hamlin.
Hamlin. Yeah, that definitely got me started because that one combines the Greek mythology with a romance with Andromeda and Perseus and saving her from the Kraken. And you still have the monsters, you still have the gods. And so I was fascinated with that. But then I remember doing like units in school and things like that. And I don't know how or why, but a lot of the details of the gods got just lodged in my brain. And so I didn't have to do a ton of research, particularly around the main pantheons of gods. I for whatever reason, know most of those myths. And where I got to have fun and play, like you said, was in the details of it, where you're bringing in some of the lesser known gods. And there's tons. They've got gods for practically everything in the Greek mythology realm. And for instance, the Dionysus's bar that's in Olympus, the goddess who is the bartender there. And I had to research that one. So I literally was like, what would be a funny power to have her be the bartender? And I found Lethe, who is the goddess of oblivion. So that just made me laugh. So it was little details like that would be like in the course of writing it, I'd be like, oh, I need something like this. Is there already a god or goddess out there that does that?
And what about also just creating this new world? So even though you're building it on mythology, again, this is a brand new world for you. It's a brand new series. If people didn't know, this is the first of a trilogy, where your other series have been longer and more established. You have several books in those. Again,
Mm.
you're starting off something new, but there's there is a basis there.
For me, the world building is one of my very favorite things to do. It's funny because it wasn't always, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I liked coming up with all the magical elements in all of my paranormal romances, but I was probably 3 or 4 books in, still a baby author. And one of my early reviews was like, once she figures out world building, these will be good books. And I was like, what am I, at the time, I was like, what am I missing? Do you want the color of the couch? What's happening here? Why is that important? And it took just, I'm constantly doing workshops and things trying to, I guess you could say, improve my craft, but mostly just try it different and try different things and approach it different ways and improve as a writer as I go. And so I eventually took some really good world building workshops. Sherry Thomas, who wrote the Lady Sherlock series, she does a fantastic workshop on world building where she talks about no matter what genre you're talking about, you're still having to build the world to a certain extent. And so approaching it from the perspective of whichever character you're telling the point of view from. My husband and I walk into a room, he and I are going to notice very different things. I'm probably going to notice the way things match and the way the aesthetic, and he's going to notice that there was a bar in the corner. It's different things just because of what we're most interested in, or our perspectives, or our experiences, or things like that. And I thought that was just a brilliant little tip to every time I approach a new scene. It's what would this particular character notice? And then and what is important in the moment. But eventually, especially with my dragons, my Inferno Rising series, the world building really started to click for me and become like one of those things where at this point, my editors have to dial me back. They have to be like, okay, do you really need this detail in here? Like, how important is it to the story? And I'm like, but it's cool.
And as readers, I think a lot of times we enjoy those details. I mean, but how do you keep track of all of that? And so when the editors are saying, do you really need this? I mean, are these things that you're obviously creating them so it's building on your view of the world, but do you also
Mm.
keep notes on that separately of, even though this might not have gone into the book, here was this other detail about this character or this situation, just in how you're keeping track then for other later books?
Some of it, most of it just sticks in my head, but I keep copious notes on all my worlds. And just because partly because I need the notes for later books. Sometimes there's enough time and other projects between books that it's, oh yeah, I need to remind myself exactly how this world works again, or what details I've put into the world. But other times it's what gets published is 7 versions away from what I originally wrote. And I have to remind myself, oh, like this got cut, or we changed this element of it, or things like that. I've got a whole, with Games Gods Play, a whole backstory for Boone that was in there and then got cut that involves like another thief. And he came from Dallas, and we took that all out. um, and so I was talking to a friend and I was like, yeah, so in book 2, Dallas. And they were like, he's not from Dallas. And I was like, yeah, he is. And then I was like, oh yeah, we cut that part. And so yeah, I have to take lots and lots of notes. I use OneNote, by
What
the way. Yeah, that's my life is in OneNote.
you said you also just keep some of that information just in your head, like the fact that it's the Dallas tie.
Yeah.
But how is that? Okay, and this is probably a weird question, but how is that really working then in your head? Are you like seeing, are you immersed in this world? Do you see everything like a movie? Are they just
Mhm.
talking to you? A file cabinet of, oh yeah, this was this other particular fact, and let me pull this out. How is your brain working on this stuff, Abby?
I I think it works in all the ways. So just recently, I've been diagnosed ADHD for years and years, but just recently, because my daughter was diagnosed, I was also recently diagnosed autistic. And so I've decided that my brain's superpower is having so many different ways to approach the story. So for the most part, I see everything like a movie. I really see all the details of it, and I can tell when I'm struggling with the scene that I'm not picturing it, basically. And then I have to sit down and be like, okay, why can't I picture it? And so there's that element to it. My characters absolutely talk to me. They are real people and voices in my head. And they tell me where the story is going sometimes. And I'm like, no, 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 but we're supposed to go over here. And they're like, but this, and we go there where. And actually, I just read recently a magazine article, I can't remember what magazine it was, that was a study that said that they have determined that when you're reading in particular, your brain lights up in the same way that it does when you're actually interacting with a real human. Chemically, at least, your brain doesn't know the difference between a fictional character on a book and a real person in your life. And I think for authors, maybe that's even like to another level because we spend so much time, months and hours with these characters. And so to me, they're very real people. And so maybe that's partly how that sticks in my head is that to me, these are like, I've seen it, I've been with them. So it's real.
That makes a lot of sense to me because I read another article too where and blowing my mind because I've read so much and I picture all these things. Like you said, it's a
Hmm.
movie. I'm there in the space, and not everybody reads like that. And
Hmm.
that some
Yeah.
is literally just words on a page. Even if you're talking about something or describing something as mundane, maybe as a beach, it's
Hmm.
okay. Other people, a lot of people can picture themselves actually there. They're smelling the ocean. They can feel the sand,
Yep.
the colors, and all this. And other people, it's oh yeah, okay, it's a beach. And
Well, and authors, I think, are similarly diverse in how they picture things or see things. I've got another author friend who's actually also autistic, and she doesn't, she's got, can't remember what, it's like a something aphasia, where she literally can't picture things. So to me, if you say there's a green apple, I can picture every detail of it. I can picture the light on it. I can picture who's holding a hand holding, like I picture all the details, and she doesn't see anything. She's just a, it's not there. And so I was like, does that make it harder as an author? And she was like, no, I just write it the way I read it. And it's okay. Everybody's got their way.
And that's also interesting because if you're picturing all this, and
Mm.
I would think that would be such a boon, really, of when you are the creative force behind that. But before you spent 15 plus years in the tech world, which is not
Using the
always
other side of my brain.
exactly, and doing things in various technical writing roles, business
Mhm.
roles. How was that mesh? And do you find, even though that's the other side of your brain, I
Mm.
mean, do you find those skills from the tech world and your degree where it was more technical writing helpful with what you're doing now?
And
Is it just completely different?
super helpful in but in different ways, less so in the writing space other than keeping it organized. And really actually while my degree is in technical writing, I ended up not doing anything with it and getting into, I spent 5 years doing at a very small startup web design company doing HTML and things like that, and then spent 10 years at Intel as a business analyst. So I was just knee deep in spreadsheets and numbers and analyzing exactly how much Dell and HP were going to sell for them or buy from them. And eventually got my MBA with that because I had an English background, not a business background, and discovered that 10 years with Intel basically is an MBA all by itself.
Oh yeah, I believe that.
But those skills then end up helping, including the MBA, on the kind of the business and marketing side that you have to do as an author, no matter if you're traditional published, indie published, you're still doing a lot of the hustle. And plus doing things like setting up an LLC and making sure that you're doing taxes right and making sure you know, that element of things, but it's also thinking through the market and who am I marketing to and how do I reach them and what do the graphics look like? And all of that side of my brain helps tremendously, I think, with that side of the career.
Mhm. And do you find that you also have to keep all of that even more organized because you're balancing multiple names, multiple types of books? And we're talking about the latest romantasy now, and
Mm.
of course your paranormal books, but you also do sweet romances and you do contemporary
Yeah.
romances and you do YA, all very different audiences sometimes, even though you have some, because I love the snowballs, but that do cross over. But how do you keep that aspect of it straight? Again, organization?
Organization, that helps. I think so. I actually burnt out really hard trying to keep up with all of that, particularly because in the romance genre, and I think if I had enough time in the day, I would read every subgenre of romance. I just love them. If there's an HEA, I read it and I would love to write it. But after getting into three pen names, I discovered that I did not have enough time to, or at least I don't write fast enough to be able to keep up with that. I got to a point where for about a 5 year period in the romance genre, to keep up with the readers who are voracious, you have to be turning out at least 2 books a year under the same pen name and genre at a minimum. And so with 3 pen names, that was minimum 6 books a year. And I was doing somewhere between 6 and 8 books a year for about 5 years straight, which is why I have 50 books written. But I burned out really hard trying to keep up with all that. which means that I eventually came to the conclusion, as much as I love writing the other genres, that it was time to kill off my other pen names. And so yeah, that's what I ended up having to do and focus on the one that brings at least me the most joy. I love them all, but the paranormal and all the magical elements, to me, that's the most fun for my brain to write. I miss the sweets because those were like my brain break in between the incredible violence that I wrote. So that was nice for that piece of it. But yeah, I had to keep all of that organized incredibly, especially the social media aspect of it, because I had to keep the social media separate. There are, as you said, readers that cross over, but there are very many other readers who don't. And oddly, I find odd, particularly the sweet contemporary romance readers tend to get very offended by anything that doesn't fit the sweet space. And so I wanted to make sure, that's why I did separate pen names, was so that people would know exactly what they were getting and not be surprised by something.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and then keep it up with it.
Because in addition to just keeping up with all of the writing and the marketing and the business side of it,
Mm,
you've got to still balance that with the rest of your life.
yeah. Yeah,
I
it
mean,
helps that I do it full time and from home, which means that that makes my schedule very flexible for my family. My kids at this point are teenagers, and so are hitting this very independent, I don't need you in my life, mom's phase of life, which is very bittersweet for me, but does free up my time a little bit. But when they were littler, that was more. I want to say, let's see, when I wrote and self-published my first book, I was working at Intel 60 hours a week. The kids were 2 and 4 years old, and I was getting my MBA at the time. And I thought that would be a fantastic time to write a book and self-publish it. I don't know what I was thinking.
oh my gosh. Also, with your kids getting to that age or the age they are now, are they expressing interest that they want to read your books? Or are they so over it and they're like, no, we're just not going to do this?
So for the most part, I don't think it's their genre. My daughter does read in the fantasy genre, and she's hitting an age where I'm like, yeah, she could probably read like Liar's Crown, but for the most part, yeah, they're just like, games is the very first one that my son, who's older, was like, oh, that one actually sounds interesting, mom. And I was like, oh, good. I'm crossing over
Hey, yay!
to your to your demographic. And he was like, yeah, maybe not. That's
Well,
funny.
before we transition into our fresh fiction facts,
I know.
there is one thing that I'm always, I can't believe that you did this, and it's been a while, but you
Oh.
were, or you are an ex-professional skydiver.
Yeah.
And doing that competitively, sorry, this just seems nuts to me, okay?
Yeah.
And the fact
Yeah,
that it's competitive skydiving.
oh, it was so fun. I miss it a lot. I stopped when basically when I got married, and pretty quickly after that we had our first, and I have to drive a car. I don't have to jump out of a plane. My kids might need me around. Not that I was, but it's something I got into in college. There was a college team. Technically, it wasn't a team sponsored by the university. It was just a club, but we were a team that would go out to collegiates and things and other competitions and compete. And the reason they did that was so that the university was not liable if there was any kind of terrible accident. Essentially, that's why. And I got into it because there was a guy that I was dating in college, and that's what he was doing. And I was like, I'll do it once for my 21st birthday just to see what you guys are talking about and what you're doing all weekend, every single weekend. And then I really loved it. And it's funny because I'm terrified of heights. Um, it's not a heights thing. That does not trigger at all. At least not once you're out of the plane.
So the competitive aspect, is it that you were doing certain tricks? Was it whether or not you hit the target?
There's different competitions like those. I did what's called formation skydiving, and it's not making pretty formations. It's a team sport where at the beginning of the season, they have a set list of formations and you practice those. And then for a competition, there's usually do 3 or 4 jumps in a day. And each jump is determined as they put all the formations in a hat and they draw them until they have 3 to 5 points, and each formation is a point. And you have to do those, it's timed, and for they film it for 1 minute. So you do those in the order that they drew them over and over again in that minute. And the goal is to get as many points as possible. And it was awesome. And on really pretty blue sky days, I'm like, oh, I could be skydiving right now.
I'm I am going to take your word for it because I don't think that's something I would probably ever really do.
It's amazing. I suggest jumping out of a plane at least once for everybody. It's a perspective changer.
Okay. Okay, I will say I will build up to it. I'm planning on doing a hot air balloon next year, and I think that will be the initial.
That'll be how you start.
Yes, yes.
Hot air balloons are very peaceful and they're fun to jump from.
I will keep that in mind at the time, but okay, Abby. Okay, let's jump to our fresh fiction rapid fire questions, our fun
Okay.
facts. Okay, things off the top of your head, not meant to stump you.
Okay.
Other than books, what is something that you own a ridiculous amount of?
Holiday decorations. I have bins and bins for every single holiday, and I keep adding to them because I have a whole 3 dormers in our house that are just set aside for holiday bins. My husband has now limited me to I can add to it 1 new decoration per holiday. Because yeah.
Yeah,
Halloween
I'm
is what
here
I'm
because
working on
I'm
the
also
most at the
getting
moment.
rid of stuff. So I am making the flow of things. I can get rid
Okay.
of things and then I can get new things.
Yeah, I'm actually usually very good at purging. I don't purge holiday decorations. They're like friends. Just
You've been kidnapped, but they return you 2 hours later because you will not stop talking about what?
That's a good question. I think pretty much like Lyra, I think it's not that I would have any one subject. I think just a constant stream of sarcasm would be coming out of my mouth. Where and it would be observations on, don't you need to break? You need to break now. I think it's time. Did you miss the turn? It's right over there. That would be me.
What road trip snack do you grab every single time? Be it a gas station one or one that you fix at home?
I have a couple go-tos because we do a lot of really long road trips. We drive from where we are in Austin to up to Estes Park in Colorado almost every summer, among other things that we drive to. So we do a lot of long road trips. I am definitely a Coke girl. I need caffeine to keep me going in the car. On the snack side of things, this is a holdover from like the 90s. I'm a huge combos fan with the cheese in the center, the pretzels with the cheese. That's a go-to. And I'm also a big fan of any chips that are vinegar flavored.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, maybe related with current book, but if you were going to start a cult, what kind of cult would you start?
Cult would I start? And I would start a reading cult. That sounds really nice, doesn't it? Just to hang out with people who like to read books and talk about it all the time. And you just, yeah. And you put the
You should
non-readers
have
to work
retreats, right?
farming the farm for you so that you can have the time to read.
That'd be fantastic. Yes, please. Would you rather go back in time to meet your ancestors or go forward and meet your descendants?
I would rather go back in time. I think I would be afraid to see what the future actually looks like, especially given how rapidly it's changing. I think it would be fascinating to talk to ancestors who we just recently, where I live, the town where I grew up, I didn't move here until I was 8, and we hadn't had any family who had lived here. My parents, both of their families were in the oil industry, and then my dad was military. Their whole family's scattered, basically. And but what I had found out, so my parents moved us here and my grandparents moved here right around the same time. So we had 3 generations all attending the same church together. And then I discovered that my great grandmother had gone to the college that was here and attended the same church while she was attending the college way back in 1910. And then of course my children, when we moved back to Texas from California, we moved back to my hometown and go to that church. So they just celebrated their 175th anniversary. And I was like, we have 5 generations that went to the same church. And so I think it'll be fascinating. I was just picturing like my great grandmother walking through the same sanctuary that's been there since the 1800s. And yeah.
Very cool. Oh, neat. Um, what is one thing that you think became or was ruined once it became popular?
Any song that gets overplayed. There are so many songs where it was like I was really into it and then they overplayed it and now it comes on and I'm just like, no.
Yeah. What is your most dog-eared or reread book? The one that you
Oh,
keep
that's a
going
good
back to?
question. It's probably most of my Johanna Lindsay collection of books.
Okay, now you got
Particularly
to tell me
her,
which one it is.
it's particularly the Mallory novels. I love all her Mallorys. Um, those I probably go back to the most. I also have a whole set of books from the 70s that I got as used books in the early 90s that I've reread so many times I've had to like desperately go out and find new copies. And so like I have 4 or 5 copies of there's one called Summer Rainfall by Carrie Allen, who was a Australian Harlequin category romance author. And that I think I have 6 copies of that thing. And then they finally put them on Kindle and now they're on Kindle and like safe.
Wow. Yeah, I have some of mine like that where it's okay. And I like how you term it that they're safe. It's okay because there's some I have gone through so many times and I have the multiple copies and oh no, now I have this as an ebook. So I can
Exactly. Now I can not ruin it, which is
exactly.
ebooks have revolutionized my reading because now I can carry 100 of them with me. But what I do is I read it in an ebook. Then if I love it enough, I get the trove shelfie. Shelfie
Yes,
trove. Trove shelfie.
that
No,
works. That
I can't
works.
say it
Yes.
anymore.
Which you almost are forcing because as much as I've tried to go ebook on so many books, this book is just gorgeous. God's play. I mean, I was at a bookstore last night and prepping for another event, and it had this wonderful display at the Sherman BAM.
Oh,
And I was there
nice.
with my dad, and I'm like, I'm interviewing her tomorrow night, and he's
Okay.
such a pretty book. And I'm like, I know.
It's gorgeous. They hit every single authors have all these dreams of if I could just be in print, and then it's if I could just be in hardcover or trade paperback or whatever it is. And it's this checked off every single like author dream with the sprayed edges and the inside and paper decorations and the foiling on the it's and I was like, okay, I finished this series. I could retire happy, just done. You already checked off all the dreams.
Okay, what are you working on next? What should our readers look for?
So I'm working on book 2 right now and having a really good time with it. Be rare. We've got announcements about that one coming out pretty soon here, and I'll probably go straight from writing that into writing book 3 because this one will be a trilogy. And then, believe it or not, at the moment I don't have anything else contracted, so I get to play with it. I'm already thinking spin-offs. This world is just so big and so fun for me to write in, and there's so many characters that I think I'd like to explore even more that I'm already thinking through what I'd want to do with spin-offs.
See, we can get Boone's backstory as a novella then.
I would love to do exactly. Yeah, I might have to hold on to that for Boone. Um, and there's a couple of others I want to explore. I'd love to do more with Aphrodite and Hephaestus. I would love to do something with Medusa. There's just so many different cool stories and characters. I think that it would be really fun to explore. I could do something with the thieves. I could do something with the minor gods. There's so many ways.
Exactly. And again, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's just such a wealth of material in mythology and where you can do your own spin on so many of these elements.
There really is, yeah. And particularly in this world, I very deliberately kept it so that it's not just the Greek gods. There's multiple pantheons of gods. I could, if I wanted to, hop over and I could do something with Norse gods or just have fun, play.
With all of that, then where is the best place for our readers and listeners to keep up with you and find out all those details of the upcoming books?
Oh yeah. The best place to start is my website, which is abigailowen.com. From there, you can get to all of my social media. You can sign up for my newsletter. Probably where I am most active is my newsletter. That's where you're going to get every single announcement in some way, shape, or form. Or I have a private Facebook group called Abby's Awesome Nerds, and I try to interact pretty daily with the nerds there. And I do some things there that you don't get other places. So yeah.
Abby, thanks again for joining us this evening. It's always wonderful to talk with you. And for our readers and listeners, go to Abby's page, follow all this information. And if you haven't gotten it already, get the copy of, again, one just listed on all sorts of different best of 2024 books lists. And it is the games that gods play. You've got to check it out. It's fantastic.
Yay, thank you.